Good evening. 3,813 days until I am 40. And we're just going to wait for this to sync and jump in. But I got to tell you, this showing up practice thing, it it's humans are just very inconsistent things, you know? Like we are very inconsistent. And and showing up is it's extraordinary. um so I picked the topic of bonds today because I want to actually go through a bunch of different kind of bonds. And it reminded me of actually one of my really old favorite shows I used to watch on Saturday mornings. And I was looking for a very specific phrase. And I was like, wow, I still remember this. And I found the show and I found the phrase. I was like literally skipping through trying to find exactly where that phrase is. So I'm going to try and play it. I don't know if the audio is going to capture. Hopefully it does, but if it doesn't, we'll find out. And then we'll continue to the other topics of bonds. But let's give this a shot. Share screen, entire screen, allow. So the show is Dragon Booster. Yeah, I used to love this show. There's a hero. He has a cool dragon. He's trying to prevent a war. Trains every day. Races on the streets. Tries to make money. Probably where my love of cars came from as well. But the phrase specifically is this. Here. Yeah, that's a line. um, I'm gonna see if I can stop sharing now. Okay, we're back. Some bonds are too strong to be ever fully broken. Um, Inspiring. I don't know. I love those hero shows. I mean, big fan of Naruto, One Piece. Just the yeah, just the main character and the challenges that they face, cheesy or not. It's just yeah, it's just a classic. It's just a classic story, and bonds, relationships are a very key part of that. And I'm really quite experiencing that today. Like they are absolutely critical to how things go and successes, failures, navigating everything. Um, uh, and I'm really grateful for the people that I have around me. So the next topic of bonds is the financial instruments. So first time I actually came across bond as a financial instrument was again in a game growing up in RuneScape. The developers came up with a fantastic way. So basically, there's RuneScape in-game gold that you can earn and win, and obviously participate, spend in the game items and things like that. That's the game economy. And a lot of people, which I didn't realize back then when I was young, was like, why would people, pay for this game? Blah, blah, blah. But then I realized later on, it's like, wow, if you make a lot more money faster in the real world, like sometimes you just want to play the game and enjoy it and not have to go through the grind. So you just pay for the gold. But basically you pay with real world money for the in-game money to participate in the game. And there was like a huge, it was making the game less fun, and there was some legal issues with it, and they tried many things to stop it, the developers, but then they just actually designed like an incentive system to just circumvent it entirely, and that was like it was phenomenal. They just they created something called a bond that you could buy from the developers from the game, and it would be it would create it wouldn't create in-game gold. Like people in the game could put their in-game gold into bonds and sell bonds. And then with those bonds, they could then purchase membership, right? So basically, you can get in-game revenue, turn that into like game membership, real world value, but within the game still. And for others, you could just buy the bond from other players basically and convert it into in game cash. And what this did is it circumvented the whole real world transfer of money for game money that third party players were doing and scamming people and all that stuff, and just put it through a trusted source, generated additional revenue for the game developer, and satisfied both parties while also preventing scams and issues, and also preventing just the legal issue that they had was people like selling in-game assets for real world money, and for some reason that was an issue, and they pretty much put a clip on it. Like, it just was not valuable enough to do it outside. Like, the incentives just were not there, and they killed that economy by creating a incentive solution rather than like a rule based or like ban hammer and things like that. And actually, from a very early stage, I kind of recognized how, like, from those kinds of things, that when you're trying to create or incentivize or design social behavior, um, that's who we are as human beings. Rules almost never work. Um, Punishments also almost never work. Punishments is part of like a whole incentive program, perhaps, but there needs to be a whole incentive program that drives people to behave a certain way or act a certain way. And they will do it out of self interest. And by getting them to gather and act out of self interest in a certain way, you can get them to act in for the overall social good or whatever you want them to achieve. Economics 101. I'm already at time today, so I actually didn't expect to, but that's my first introductions to bonds. Later on, obviously, bonds are used for by treasure, by federal treasuries, by national treasuries, by central banks to create money, manage the economy. And in a way, they actually act very similar to how the game bonds do. And it's all about incentivizing people to add more value or maintain or get more value or keep more value or exchange more value within a certain currency system than not. And I think it's actually, which leads me to like the USA more recently. Despite everything else, they do still have like the world currency. Everybody still uses their currency, and I think they're only going to continue making that stronger as they adopt cryptocurrency and adopt stablecoins. It's going to actually enforce and strengthen the impact of the U.S. Monetary policy around the world. And I once looked up, like, I mean, we're going into a whole other topic of like monetary policy, but it's like, I just got curious, like, all right, why doesn't everybody use the US dollar, right? And it is very much about like control. Um, like, it's money. It's not necessarily about sovereignty. Like, many people in the past use like the Roman gold, denarii and stuff. So why does everybody try to set up their own currency? Because it's expensive to manage a currency. You need smart people. You need to be diligent. You need, like, there's a whole system that goes into setting that up, and not all countries have actually managed to do it successfully. And even the ones that do, like developing nations, are actually like really struggle. Anytime the U.S. dollar is strong, like if you're in Canada, you do feel it already. Like, if the US dollar is strong, the Canadian dollar, you feel it. You feel it, but like you don't mind too much. But if you're in a developing country, if you're like in Turkey, Egypt, Bangladesh, like, and your currency is not pegged to the dollar, you feel it actually a lot more. Maybe not on the day to day, but like from like a national business level, it's the impact is much stronger. And you basically then are not shielded from U.S. monetary policy. And even if you do peg your currency to the U.S. dollar, now you have to make other sacrifices. Like, you have to have enough treasury or reserves and whatnot. Everything you do, kind of, if it's priced in U.S. dollars, like, if you're not a U.S. bank or the Federal Reserve, you get access to U.S. dollars in like in a longer term horizon, you get access to the US dollars after somebody else has touched it. And the thing with inflationary currencies is that it's has the most use and if effect and impact or purchasing power for the person who's printed it, for the government, for the Federal Reserve, for the banks that have the charters that are able to do credit creation. It has the most purchasing power for them. And every additional hand that it transfers and adds like supply to the monetary system, it loses value. And if you're a foreign nation, yes, you get to buy it off like, the big money markets, but yeah, you're not the first hand. You don't have the first touch on it. So that's why, at least very rudimentary wise, a lot of countries will choose to set up their own financial systems or currencies to have like monetary sovereignty basically. And still, depending on their trade, they will probably still peg a lot of it to the US dollar. Oil producing nations like Brunei or um, Saudi Arabia do that a lot. They, because a lot of their trade or their oil or energy is traded in US dollars, so they actually have an easier time maintaining a peg with the US dollar. And in fact, nations that don't produce oil or natural resources of that sort will actually struggle more. I mean, how do I put it in like game terms? Like, if you don't earn in game currency, in the game currency, you're going to struggle with it, and then you have to buy it at a discount off market somewhere else, something like that. I think I'll just stop there for now. There's actually a lot of progress I made in today, especially just taking the idea of bonds further into like the Bitcoin world. I believe if like Bitcoin is considered like a store of value, right? It's like real estate. It's like gold in some way. Now, real estate you can live in it has a different value. Gold more so, you know, um, it just stays the same over time, over a long period of time. Like if in a way, real estate even doesn't, right? Like you could lose your land to whatever storm or gold has a longer lasting. Like you need to protect your land. Gold you can protect easier. You also need to protect your gold. Bitcoin just makes both of these functions a lot easier. Store value, easier to protect, carry it anywhere in large amounts, not a problem. So it has a lot of these elements, and that's why it has the characteristic, and it's gaining the value and recognition that it has or is doing. Now, Bitcoin operates in an entirely different way, right? It's not like fiat. And in some ways, you could, okay, this is definitely another topic for another day, but in some ways, you could have like everything denominated in land prices, right? You could have everything denominated in gold. Gold, everything was denominated in gold at one point. But there are huge inefficiencies, like with today's communication capabilities, gold can't keep up, and land most definitely can't keep up, but Bitcoin can. And what I guess where the drive or what Bitcoiners want from like a belief standpoint is to return to something like a gold standard, to return to sound money, to uh, you know, even the playing field a bit with like from the money printers to hey, everybody has access to this, a more equitable access to this currency or store of value. And yet it's extremely volatile, and volatility does not make it for easy adoption. In fact, a lot of foreign currencies are also actually very volatile. You'll hear a lot of people making money in foreign exchange or whatever. Like, I've not actually tried it myself, but having studied it, it's the money is made on the volatility. The currencies move every day, and the ones that move more, they're more risky, but they're also more profitable as well. And Bitcoin right now is it's more volatile than currencies in general, actually, than even fiat currencies. But it has a lot of that nature. It trades 24/7 all the time. It's a store of value, and it it's intended to be a currency. But the volatility comes from now. There's If you look at foreign currencies, there are the volatile ones and then the less volatile ones. And the less volatile ones are managed. They have strong, like, those nations have strong, like, resources or energy, or they have a very driven agenda to maintain parity with the US dollar, for example. So they're basically like stable coins, like the Saudi Riyal or the Brunei. What are they called? The Brunei ringgit? Is that Brunei ringgit or Brunei dollar? They're pegged to the US dollar, and they put a lot, like, of energy to maintaining that peg, and it's basically a stable coin. Whereas others are much more volatile, like the Turkish lira, for example. I just pulled one, it's just in my head. And over time, like, all currencies actually, if they are not managed and pegged to the US dollar, they are volatile, and they have to be managed in different ways. And one of the biggest ways that they're managed is actually by attracting US dollar capital, or by attracting other capital and issuing bonds. They issue bonds or treasury notes, and they promise an interest payment on a debt. And what that does is, because you're promising a certain return, it helps over a longer period of time. It locks capital into your economy for longer. Whether it's productive or not is debatable, but the effect is that more of your currency is being taken off the market and stored longer term, and it helps to reduce the volatility of your currency, increases its adoption and people's interest in it, and like it helps make it get closer to being a stable coin or a currency that people use mainly within your nation very easily, but also, immediately outside for a lot of transactions. It makes it simpler and easier to do. What I'm trying to say or get to, and I've gone for way over, and I'll probably repeat this in the future, is that Bitcoin needs its own treasury of sorts. It needs its own bonds. It needs to have people already lock up Bitcoin for longer periods of time, right? And they just don't do anything with it. But it needs to be in exchange. Like, if it wants to truly achieve the currency status that Bitcoiners believe in, or hope for, it needs to be used in an exchange. And before it's used on a more regular basis and it stabilizes, there are steps to that stability. One, obviously, is already in progress, where people are just hodling Bitcoin and holding it long term. But I think it's coming to the days where, and people are, they're borrowing against Bitcoin, they're lending against Bitcoin, and these are the early signs. And effectively, the conversation has come to the idea of Bitcoin bonds. Um, Lock up dollars for a certain period of time, invest it, just like how you might mine Bitcoin. You put energy resources towards fiat energy and resources towards getting Bitcoin extracted, and verifying transactions, doing the work, and earning Bitcoin. In a very similar way, these bonds would act, but on a longer term horizon. The You're not just locking up, Bitcoin. You're locking up US dollars together with Bitcoin, and you're extract you're you're working to put that in towards an exchange, towards business, towards lending, borrowing in more traditional sense, and generate value that can actually, because that long-term value, it can actually help to stabilize Bitcoin as a currency. Now, I think we have a long way to get there. I think it's like at least another 10 years out. But hey, that's where this whole thing is. I'm 10 years out from 40. I think Bitcoin's 10 years out from fully realizing its dream and vision, and I'm here to support it and push it along. I'm actually surprised I did this video for this long. I will definitely stop it right now, and I'll continue again tomorrow. Thank you for listening.